Welcome, everybody. This is Defending Your Law, where active legislators are given the ability to defend the bills that they hope to make laws. I'm Max. I will be asking the questions, and we are very lucky to have rising star freshman state representative of Kentucky's 66th district, T.J. Roberts.
Thank you so much for having me on, Max.
My pleasure. You've only been in office for a month, but it might be a little too soon. But you really are running away with possibly legislator of the year.
Thank you. I really do appreciate it. I'm just here to keep my campaign promises.
That's kind of, yeah. So you ran a very contentious campaign, two campaigns. You ran a contentious primary against a former state representative who had a lot of money, a lot of powerful backing. Won 75%, 30%, 25%, correct?
Yeah, about there.
And then 70%,
74.9.
Yeah, who's counting? And then 70% to 30% in the general. And so you really have a mandate. And a lot of people could have been lazy with that and taken that mandate to just raise money and make speeches. But am I correct? You've already introduced 45 bills in 1 month?
That's not correct. So I've done about 20-ish. So when you look at the legislature profile, that's for every bill that you have introduced or co-sponsored. So I've introduced, it's in the 20s now. I introduced a few bills today, including things like eminent domain reform and just protecting the unborn from illegal abortion pills from coming into Kentucky, things like that. But yeah, I'm about at 20. I've co-sponsored a bunch of bills just to send that message to people that, look, I'm here to work with you when you are doing something that advances the cause of liberty. If we're getting the government closer to its original purpose, which is to protect life, liberty, and property, I want to be involved in that fight.
I mean, yes, I take back everything I said. You're lazy. Just kidding. But 20 still is extremely impressive for 1 month. How can you go through how you wrote these bills? Was it you? Was it lobbyists? Was it constituents?
Yeah, so a lot of it was constituent driven of they specifically requested issues. Now, that doesn't mean that they had the language itself, but what I do is I take that language, I submit it to a bill drafter who then makes sure that it's in conformity with the Kentucky revised statutes. And from there, we jacket it. I go to my colleagues to see what their thoughts are, and we hopefully move on the bills accordingly. And so far, it's been a wonderful process of really trying to hone in and find out what are the areas that I can get a majority of both chambers to come together on of getting the government out of your life. And we've got quite a few things rolling on it, and we'll see how much moves. But I think that a lot of it is also just starting those conversations. Some of these ideas were just directly from me as well, of just getting the drafting there and sending that off to the bill drafters too. I will say none of these bills have come from lobbyists. I can assure you of that.
That's pretty rare. And yeah, they really do run the gamut, like so many different issues. And so when we talked about doing this interview, I asked you, out of all the bills that you've written, which one would you want to defend? And you chose HB2, which concerns gold and silver, but is really a much deeper constitutional issue. Why this bill HB2 and not the others?
Right. So gold and silver are legitimate money. Let's be very clear on that. They are the true constitutional money for that matter. Many people use gold and silver as a hedge against inflation. They also use it for their retirement. This goes across all socioeconomic backgrounds. You spend 30-ish dollars and you now have an ounce of silver that is absolutely going to grow above the rate of inflation. So it's a good commodity to protect. And last session, we passed a bill out of House Bill 8. Representative Doan and Representative Petrie, they fought to make sure that if you are a Kentuckian, you will never have to pay sales or use taxes on gold and silver and bullion. This is just us saying we are acknowledging the legitimate role that gold and silver plays in honest money. And we got that through. And then Andy Beshear claimed to line item veto this, which there is no line item veto in Kentucky for tax issues. So he can't do that. It's unconstitutional to engage in a line item veto. So what happened was we just proceeded as if it never happened. You go to our list of exemptions from the sales tax. Number 37 is gold and silver. And that is on the books. But then in August of 2024, Andy Bashir put in an order directing his Department of Revenue to disregard the legislature and continue collecting that tax. So House Bill 2 makes it abundantly clear that the legislature, not the governor, gets to write the law. It makes clear that the legislature, not the governor, controls the power of the purse. And it does so by reaffirming that sales tax exemption. But it also makes clear that there will be consequences if you disregard the law, if you disregard the legislative process. Particularly, it makes it to where if you have purchased silver on or before and on or after August 1st of 2024, you can sue the governor, the head of the Department of Revenue, and the the cabinet and finance secretary in their individual and their official capacities. And it entitles you to a refund of the taxes that you paid. It entitles you to pre and post judgment interest at 6% per year, because let's face it, you're purchasing this in the hope that it grows value over time. That is interest that you have lost out on with that money that otherwise you wouldn't have had to spend, that you could have purchased more gold and silver with. But further, upon adoption of the bill, if you file this suit, it entitles this person and the class action that is implicated in it to $1,000 per day per member of the class, taken directly out of the budget of the governor, the cabinet, the finance cabinet, or the Department of Revenue. In addition, it makes clear that we're going to have the governor and co personally liable for the attorney fees, the court costs, the witness fees, because you shouldn't have to pay to have your rights vindicated. The people who violated your rights should pay. So that's what House Bill 2 does. It's an honor to see this remarkable support that it has gotten in the legislature, and I look forward to it becoming the law. And I look forward to watching Andy Bashir have to pay for his ridiculous actions of trying to essentially turn Kentucky into a monarchy.
So in Illinois, we have an arrogant liberal governor, J.B. Pritzker, but we don't have any legislative recourse. Is even though you have a Democrat governor, you are one of the few states that has a super veto-proof majority, correct?
Yes. So actually, in Kentucky, we only need a simple majority to override the veto. We only need 51 members of the House and 20 members of the Senate to override a governor's veto. And we have 80 Republicans in the House, and we have 31 Republicans in the Senate. So I am extraordinarily confident that House Bill 2 will be vetoed by the governor, but we will immediately override his veto.
Yeah, from reading the media, just based on the media, it seems like a lot of the Republican forces that may have opposed in the primary are actually getting behind this bill. You have a lot of co-sponsors?
So, I don't want to get into the prior primary issue because everyone has a right to support whomever they want in the primary. I was not entitled to that seat. My opponent was not entitled to that seat, and people have that right to take their pick. And hopefully, I'm just showing that this district, House District 66, young conservatives, we're America first. We believe in life, liberty, and property. And the thing that is great is just that individuals who, yeah, there are folks who have been skeptical of me in the past, but it has been an honor to work in good faith with every member of this caucus to be clear that we are here to do the people's business.
Yeah, this was a very creative solution. I don't think this is something that like you really have to think outside the box because like in terms of damages, so if I bought one silver bullion coin August 2024, I would not be entitled to like $100,000 by now, and I would have been
So that so that 100 so that $1,000 per day, that to apply that retroactively would be an ex post facto issue. The retroactive provision is only for the refund and the interest. So,
okay.
but the $1,000 per day, that begins upon the date of the adoption of the bill. Just to be clear, that's just a constitutional thing. Um, and further, by the way, just to talk about, because as you said, it's a creative solution. Yeah, I did get creative on it. And the reason why, right now in Kentucky, I learned that in order to appeal an illegal collection of a tax, so the Department of Revenue collects the tax. If you want to appeal, you have to go to the Tax Board of Appeals. The problem is that they both answer to the same person, the governor of Kentucky. So it is, I mean, it is literally asking us to let the guardsmen check the guardsmen. You know, we checked our own work and we found that we did nothing wrong. There's no accountability in that. And the administrative appeal process is long, it's drawn out, it's politically stacked against the people. So I'm trying to create that judicial remedy. I'd like to see this maybe eventually extended to all illegal tax collections. Now, we don't really have that problem in Kentucky, but we clearly have it with this specific tax. But I do think that everyone should have a judicial remedy when the government wrongs you, not just an administrative one.
Would you go farther on any time a governor ignores a law in general? Because that does seem to be pretty common.
Well, I actually have a bill on that in itself. House Bill 81 is legislation that makes it to where if an executive branch agency head or the governor violates a budget restriction, they use tax dollars for purposes that was not authorized by the legislature and was explicitly prohibited from being used. It entitles someone to initiate a circuit court action against them to have them removed from office and banned from holding any other position of public trust or profit for the next 10 years. So, and we already have budget restrictions. You can't use tax dollars to engage in campaigning, for example, in Kentucky. The problem is we don't have teeth on these bills. And we have to, if you enact a law, but there's no teeth to it, it's not a law. Anyone can proclaim you're not allowed to murder someone. But if you murder someone, we're going to put you in prison for the rest of your life. If there's no teeth to the bill, you may as well have just spoken your mind, which that's great. And a lot of social change happens when people speaking out. But when we're doing the people's business, if we're going to be collecting taxes without the people's consent that they have to pay or they go to jail, we better be using those tax dollars for a purpose that the people find legitimate. And I see no legitimacy in acting laws with no teeth.
Well, that's why it's pretty cool with your bills. I believe of the 20 bills, aren't 19 bills, and like only one is a resolution, which I love. Because
Yes.
I feel like a lot of people use resolutions to kind of get in the news and be like, "See, I said something on this issue, but no teeth."
Right. And even my resolution does have teeth, by the way.
Isn't the
But
highway? Isn't to rename the highway for
yeah,
President?
it designates one of the most traveled roads in my district to the President Donald J. Trump Highway, which would actually have a sign placement. It's only like $500 to get that sign placed, but also I think it would be revenue positive because the number of liberals threatening to never take that road again, they're going to have to take some windy roads. I'm in a pretty rural area. So they're going to be filling up their gas tank more often and paying more gas taxes. So as far as I'm concerned, keep it going, baby. Let's get the revenue up.
Yeah, that'd be a tourist attraction. You maybe get a train on there, get a Trump train.
Right. Right. I think it's revenue positive.
I agree, and I love
So
it. I also think it's also
even my resolutions have teeth.
so you are someone that have like strong opinions, but you kind of have followed through with it. And I do think this resolution also. A lot of people say they're pro Trump, but now they have an opportunity to like just for $500 so they actually
Yeah.
support him.
Right.
And we'll
It's
see.
and it's $500 total, by the way. And let's compare this. If people talk about the liberals talking about how it's wasteful spending, we just found out today that Andy Bashir spent $80,000 of your taxes to go on a taxpayer-funded vacation to Madrid, Spain, and Davos, Switzerland, to rub elbows with the elites at the World Economic Forum. If you're not going to call out that $80,000 taxpayer-funded waste, you have no business calling out a $500 expenditure that's overwhelmingly supported by the people of this district.
Well, yeah. So Andy Bashir, I do kind of see as a Justin Trudeau type figure, where he's like kind of second generation in politics, like pretty boy, talks a big game, but is just like so evil, just as bad as a Gavin Newsom or JB Pritzker. Why haven't Kentucky voters seen through his nonsense?
Well, I think that Kentucky voters overwhelmingly see through Andy Bashir. The problem is we don't show up in odd numbered year elections. And that's the thing. Our gubernatorial elections are the year before the presidential race. So as a consequence, we don't have as much voter turnout in those races as we should. I guarantee you, Andy Beshear would not be the governor of Kentucky if he had to face the voters in 2020, in 2018, in 2022, 2024, or 2026 for that matter. And he will not be the governor come January 2028. And I look forward to living the rest of my life without ever having a Democrat governor ever again.
That's too big of a vision for me. I wish I could have that vision because I'm in
Move to
Illinois.
Kentucky.
So yeah, honestly, that might need to happen. And then my part two is like, so what's it like being your Kentucky Democrat partners on bills? Like what? Because like Illinois Republican legislators are super minority status, kind of like your Democrat counterparts, and there's not much. They really can't vote on bills. There's no consequence. So what are your Democrat
Well,
counterparts?
I've actually worked with a couple of Democrats on legislation. So, what a bill I co-sponsored is House Bill 42, which was sponsored by Democrat Chad All. This bill simply bans convicted child sex offenders from participating in Halloween activities where children are present. And that's the ultimate act of common sense. The child sex offenders should not be around children at all. Frankly, I don't think they should ever get out of prison. So why we're letting them be around children with their freedom? It's absurd to me. We just have a case right now in North Carolina where a girl was kidnapped by a registered child sex offender on Halloween, and he was using the Halloween social events to get access to these kids. So that's common sense. Chad All also co-sponsored my bill, House Bill 282, to repeal the sales tax on diapers. And I just co-sponsored House Bill 214 today, which Democrat Adam Moore sponsored, that just gives a tax credit, an income tax reduction, if you take and pass a gun safety course that is certified by the current standards for concealed carry licensing. Y- you know, uh, that's great. And if anything, that bill facilitates gun ownership and it prevents incidents that make us as gun owners look bad. It's not a handout. It is a simple statement of we're going to lower your taxes if you do your patriotic duty to learn how to use a firearm safely.
Yeah, I really love how you have your principles, but you also know that that means that there are exceptions that prove the rule. Like with this HB2, this is a tax. This is a time where you actually support a tax against the government. And so, to be clear, you were saying that the money would come from the governor's budget.
Yes, so that's money that has already been appropriated. So that's the thing is that this makes clear that when we reopen the budget, because we only look at the budget every 2 years, we are not going to bail the governor out on this. If I don't care how many millions of dollars he's going to have to pay as a consequence of this, I am not voting for a budget that bails him out and bails his office out because he is not allowed to use tax dollars to harass families and small businesses in Kentucky, but that's just about all he does.
What happens if he has no budget? How's he gonna get to Davos?
Mm. I mean, poor thing, he can pay for it himself.
But practically speaking, though, is like they're probably just of like having office staff and
Well, in all seriousness,
security.
if he has to lay off his office staff and he can't function, oh well. We don't have a unitary executive, and that's for a reason. I trust our attorney general, our treasurer, our auditor, our agriculture commissioner, and our secretary of state way more than I trust the governor. I do not trust him at all. So, I mean, I don't care if it results in his budget being reduced to nothing. Oh well. Next time, maybe he'll think twice before he does it.
You'd hope
I
so
mean,
on a
I don't.
legislator.
I mean, if this lands him in bankruptcy court, oh well, maybe tear down that ridiculous fence you have outside your mansion and sell that metal for scrap to start paying it off.
I really love it because, like, I feel like, don't you agree that the legislative branch in a lot of states, and especially federally, has lost its teeth, where other executive and judicial have really grown,
We,
and so
we
this seems like a
absolutely we have given up our authority as lawmakers, and it has led to disastrous outcomes for the American people. The legislative process is meant to be a long, grueling process to make sure that laws are few and far between. And the reason why that's a good thing, Max, is that I don't want to bind 4.5 million Kentuckians to something unless we are positive that that's what is good for Kentucky. Those COVID lockdown orders that Bashir put out would have never happened if it was up to the legislative process. He made those decisions knowing full well there wasn't consensus. And he's able to do that because he's just one man. But Max, I'm only 1/100th of one half of 1/3 of this government. You don't have to have a math degree to realize that I need help to get anything done. I need 50 of my colleagues in the House. I need 20 of my colleagues in the Senate. And I either need a governor who's willing to sign it, or 51 of my colleagues in the House and 20 of my colleagues in the Senate to override his veto. And I need a court that's not going to stand in my way. I need a court that is going to follow the law and not their political ambitions. At least 4 members of the court, because there's 7 members of the Supreme Court in Kentucky, right? So I can't do that alone. And in addition, I need the grassroots. I need you guys advocating for these changes and just letting it be known that, hey, these are good measures. We're thankful to those who are fighting for them. Please jump on board with them in their fight. So those are things that we absolutely need, right? Where the governor, he can just short shrift all of it and just disregard all of it and say, hey, I'm the king and I've got a pen, like Barack Obama tried to do, right? So we need to get back to the legislature following the law so that way we can finally get back to the system of the American Republic where we're just protecting life, liberty, and property.
Back to the base. It doesn't seem that simple, but also like a lot of what you're doing of just like a lot of your social media and the way you communicate is kind of focused on what you're actually doing and what you're going to do is, and which would seem common sense from someone trying to be a lawmaker. What's like kind of what's the setback? Why are so few? Are things moving in the right direction in
I
terms of
think it's Yeah,
common
I
sense?
think it's time. I think it's time issues, if I'm being completely honest with you, Max. I'm going to be in this office for about 3 hours before I go home for the day after this interview ends. And the reason why is I made a promise that I will read every House bill that gets introduced. I will not vote yes on a bill that I have not read because I want to know what the consequences are going to be for the 4.5 million Kentuckians that I'm voting to bind. So that's something that I'm going to be doing once we get off this call, because not all the bills have been uploaded yet. I'm still waiting for that. I anticipate it's going to take about 2.5 hours for me to read all of them. That happened. I'm a fast reader, by the way, thankfully. So I agreed to do that. That's promise number one. I didn't make this promise on the campaign trail, but it's something I'm doing anyway. I am explaining every bill that I sponsor or primary co-sponsor. And the reason why is because you're paying for me to be down here. If you're a Kentucky taxpayer, you at least deserve to know what I am doing. And that's why I do that. I also promise to make it, to be clear, I promise that every significant floor vote that I take, I will give a public written explanation on. That's crucial to me as well. And look, all of that, it adds up, right? Reading the legislation and deciding how I'm going to vote is a fraction of this equation. There's the meetings with constituents, there's the committee meetings, coordinating everything, meeting with my colleagues to hear their concerns about my bills to see what I can do to alleviate those concerns. It's a long process, and I know we're a part-time legislature, but being a legislator is anything but a part-time job if you really, really, really commit yourself to it. I'm happy to do that. And it's an honor to be able to do that. And I want more people to do that. Obviously, I'm doing that to set an example of what radical transparency looks like. And I hope more people follow suit with this.
You really are, and like thank you, and just like keep at it, and you might just kind of like be that domino effect because like yeah, like how do you find time to raise money, like right? And it seems like it really is a full time job, but it feels like it's a part time job so that people could have a full time job that they use the part time job to enrich it with.
Yep. I mean, I'll be level. So one, I keep myself on Capitol grounds so I don't raise money. Um, we have an ethics rule against campaigning on Capitol grounds. So I do not fundraise. I don't really talk about my election on Capitol grounds. What you mentioned, what we mentioned was fine, but that was the closest thing to me talking about the election on Capitol grounds ever. And the reason why is I don't want to get into that stuff. That's not the people's business, right? My fundraising apparatus, my campaign style, that is not the point of what we are doing here in Frankfurt. What we are doing here in Frankfurt is we are serving the public.
Thank you. And I guess I'm media, and so on our end, I think we do a bad job because a lot of times the questions are like, how much money, who's backing you? What are your thoughts on what Trump said? What are the percent chance you think this will happen? Instead of like actually defending where you're coming from, what are your values, how like your reasoning, like why $1,000 a day versus $900 a day? Yeah, why $1,000 a day? Is it just like, do you think that's just a sweet spot?
There's a funny story behind that, but I will say it is the sweet spot. My original draft of the bill was weaker than that, by the way. I don't want to expose the story, but there is someone
You don't have to out the
who,
person.
yeah, I'm not going to, but they wanted it to be even stronger. So we've got some. So they wanted it to be even stronger, which was amazing to me to see like this appetite of like we really need to hold our executive branch accountable. And that $1,000 a day, it sends a message, especially because it's a class action enabling statute. So every member of that class is entitled to that $1,000 per day.
So yeah, you talked about the importance or just the value of owning real currency. How big is that potential class of people that bought gold and silver bullion since August of 2024? Is it
I
thousands,
hope
tens of thousands?
I hope it's massive. I don't even know the exact number, but I hope it is one of the strongest class action cases ever established in Kentucky history. Because Andy Bashir, by the way, has gone public on record saying that Kentuckians need to feel the pain for voting for Donald Trump. He is a vindictive, power hungry child, and I want him to feel the hurt for what he's doing to Kentuckians.
Yeah, he's Justin Trudeau on country face. It's really sick. Like I'm not vaccinated, and just kind of what like a lot of these governors did during COVID was disgusting. To frontline workers, to like people that really were living paycheck to paycheck, and they're so arrogant, not a touch. And he is a wealthy, privileged person, and so I'm glad it's $1,000 a day.
Thank you.
Yeah, you could maybe get 1,500, maybe 1,099.99. Nice sales number. But
Yeah, I am. But yeah, I mean, we did that $1,000 a day because again, it's time to send a message. It's time to send a message that the executive branch does not write the law in Kentucky.
And I have to be carefully legally how I word this question. But I'm out of state in Illinois. A lot of my followers are out of state. Are we legally allowed to buy gold and silver coins in Kentucky? And then
I
to be a
don't know
part of
what the
the class?
law in Illinois is, but I don't know
No,
what
no,
the
I'm going
law
to
in
be a part of
Illinois.
the Kentucky class. If I drove over the border, go to Kentucky, buy some silver bullions, am I allowed to be a part of that class? Not saying to do
This
that.
the statute does not have a residency requirement. The sales taxes apply no matter where you live.
Good to know.
I
Not
will
a
leave it at that.
recommendation. Not a
That is not a
recommendation.
recommendation to anyone. I am not your lawyer. I am not the lawyer of anyone watching this, unless you are my client, but I'm not your lawyer on this matter because
Yeah.
I'm not litigating this issue because I'm actively legislating it.
And how important, by the way, do you think it is that legislators have experience in law?
You know, some of the best legislators I know are not lawyers. So I don't think it's that important, but I will say my time in constitutional law that I still do, and it gives me a unique perspective and the ability to really catch things. Like, I'm not sure about that provision there because there's this unique case about hundreds or so years ago that says that that violates this provision of the Constitution. And people miss those things. And there are things that I miss too. I'm not so much of the opinion that every legislator needs to be a lawyer. I think every legislator needs to have an area of expertise where they can provide input and feedback to benefit their colleagues because it's a collaborative process. I mean, there's language, of course. There are bills that I've had, like one of my bills on legalizing raw milk. I didn't realize this until I filed it, and someone who is a farmer was like, "Hey, dude, look, I love this idea of legalizing raw milk, but you just left open this whole host of regulatory authority. So let's work on language to get an idea that adequately protects farmers and adequately protects consumers." And that's pretty important to do. So I am all in on this idea that legislatures need to be rather diverse in the careers and the perspectives that they have to ensure that we truly are legislating consensus.
So to bring something to the table, you can't just be taking
Yes.
from the table and dealing under the table.
Yeah.
You bring
Right.
something to the table.
Yeah. Right. Bring something to the table so that way we all get a better idea. I mean, that's the thing is like I would have moved full steam ahead on my raw milk bill as it's currently drafted if I didn't get that call. Now, though, I want to work to make sure that we have those adequate protections, right? There are people who are accountants who really know the real down and dirty of what we need to do to ensure that our legislation is something that we can truly afford. There's there's things that we miss out on if we only do lawyers. And I'm not here to disparage any of my colleagues who are attorneys. Under no stretch of the imagination, there are great colleagues who are attorneys. Like, I mean, right across the hall, Steve Doan, he is one of the best. Okay, and he's an attorney. His area of expertise is family law, by the way. I don't know the first thing about it. I don't do family law. My boss doesn't do family law. Family law attorneys get shot too often, and we don't like the idea of that having to happen to us. So, but and for that reason, I actually really respect family law attorneys. They risk their lives every time they walk into a courtroom. I mean, truly, it's tragic what goes on in that system. Um, but yeah, I want to make sure that every perspective is represented in the legislative body.
E pluribus unum. So really just like out of many one.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yes.
I really think you are like really moving the boat forward and inspiring people and teaching people because it seems like when I first got interested in politics, and I'm not a lawyer, the best information on like how to write a bill is from like YMCA debate classes that are aimed towards third graders. Because it right is am I wrong to say that writing a bill still is something that someone that doesn't have a legal background can do?
I mean, anyone can write anything. I will say, of course, like the bill drafters, I'd imagine almost all of them have gone to law school and gotten law licenses. All in all, though, I'm very like all in all though, like anyone can draft anything. I mean, some of the bills that I've submitted were not written by lawyers, and a whole lot of it is language that they specifically asked for in my district of, hey, I want something like this. And I look at this, I'm like, this looks good. Let me find the area of a KRS to put this into.
So yeah, I want to definitely like your time to like you have a lot of reading to do. But my final question is, what's your advice to someone that has an idea for a bill and maybe they don't have a state representative that represents their interests? What's your advice to them? Where should they go? What should they do?
It doesn't have to be your state rep to introduce the bill, by the way. Um, I've been approached about legislation by Kentuckians who do not live in my district. I give them due consideration. Look, my district, my constituents have priority, obviously. But to your point, you can't accomplish something with no one. So you absolutely, unequivocally have to get someone to champion your legislation. But also, you're in many ways more powerful on the outside than you are on the inside. As I said, and look, there's only two things I can really do that you can't. I can introduce legislation and I can vote on it and I can call it for the votes, right? So three things I suppose I can do that you can't.
Insider trading, you could do that.
No, that's only for
Oh,
members of Congress.
yeah, that's federal.
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
Next,
But I That's funny. I like that. I like
I
that
had
joke.
to. I'm sorry.
No, that was actually very funny. I enjoyed that. I'm um, yeah, those are the only three things I can do that you cannot do. You can still schedule a meeting with your legislator. You can still go and talk to them as well. And I urge you to do that because it's actually not that often that I get approached about a bill by just a constituent just going at it at their own. But if I see that, I'm like, you know what? This person's dedicated, and I should probably hear them out. I mean, I have an internal policy where pretty much, as long as you're acting in good faith, I'm not going to turn down a meeting with you. There are a couple that I'm absolutely not going to take because these people have histories of just fundamentally not dealing in good faith. But I have no interest whatsoever in making that assumption about people. So just because your state rep isn't necessarily for your bill, you just need a state rep who is, and that just starts that just starts the conversation. Starting your own organization that focuses on your specific issue. By the way, there is one of the most powerful things is a single issue group, and the reason why is because you can focus on just your issue, right? As a legislator, I cannot be single issue. I can't. I I have to be able to I have to be able to ask people to support bills when they were against me on other bills. You, on the other hand, if your only issue is making sure gold and silver is not taxed, well, the floor vote on House Bill 8 in 2024, that tells you who you can support and who you shouldn't support because that's the only one. So that's just a few things on that. Just that's my big piece of advice is never give up, make those connections and understand you're way more powerful than you realize.
That's amazing, inspiring, and I hope to be making a video eventually called "How to Start a Pack in 15 Minutes or Less." So, like, it's definitely
Ooh,
a lot. A
okay.
lot of this is a lot. A lot of it, yeah, as you said, it's a lot. It kind of it's like it is a lot more obtainable than you think. So a lot of it is kind of an illusion that state reps are not approachable, and that ideas can't become laws. So this is defending your law. The verdict's in. I'm supporting this law. And, and
Absolutely.
Representative Roberts, I really think you have a real chance of winning Legislator of the Year. Like you're really killing it. Amazing aspiration. I hope you raise the bar. And thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And enjoy the reading.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.